So 70 billion rand from the IMF for South Africa. It's critical, of course. This money is spent properly. It is used to help lift our country out of its economic quagmire and put us on a growth path. Well, how we do that is, of course, the big question. I'm joined by Ann Bernstein of the Centre for Development Enterprise. Good evening, Ann. Is this IMF loan a good thing for South Africa? Did we have no choice?
Sally, we went into the COVID crisis in a very weak economic position. We were already spending far more than we were managing to raise, and this had been happening for a long time, and the COVID lockdown has exacerbated the situation. So South Africa is one of about 100 countries that has gone to the IMF for emergency funding, and it's not good, but as long as it's not the beginning of a cycle where we have to go to the IMF for more money, but maybe the government has committed to do certain things, and so there's a bit more pressure on the South African government to finally act on reform and corruption.
How much do we know of the conditions of the loan? We saw in that package that we've just played by Govan Whittles that there is a commitment that it is not used to increase public sector wages. Is that the sort of thing we should not be spending it on?
We should definitely not be spending more and more money on public sector wages. If you think about it, there are about 1.3 million civil servants, and we spend nearly 60% in 2020 of tax revenue on them. That doesn't make any sense at all. Of course, a lot of those people should be doing important jobs. They're nurses, they're policemen, they're all sorts of essential things. The problem in South Africa is that public sector wages have risen much too fast over the last decade, really, much faster than the private sector, and we don't get value for money. So we appoint the wrong people, we don't appoint managers who know how to manage people well, we don't have senior executives who know how to do the job. So we continually waste money, and of course then there's enormous leakage through corruption.
Absolutely. SAA is an interesting one. Should the money go into the SAA rescue package? We've just heard today that government has confirmed lenders will receive their money. That's the big thing we've all been waiting for. Do you think it's going to come straight out of the IMF loan? Should it?
Well, I don't know enough about what was agreed today. I'm not in favour of bailing out SAA. I think there are much more important things to do with our money. And at a time when the aviation industry is reeling from the COVID-19 economic crisis around the world, why South Africa, who have failed to manage an airline effectively for the last, I don't know how long, last decade at least, thinks that they can manage a new airline effectively beats me. So I am opposed to any additional money other than the sort of loans we have to pay back. Then there's no choice on that. I am opposed to any additional money going into SAA.
All right, so what should this IMF loan be spent on? I would imagine it's on the things that might help us out of our economic dire straits. First of all, what should we spend it on? And secondly, is it laid out at all at this stage? Is there any clarity from government on where the money is going to be used?
Look, my understanding from what was released today is that this money goes into the government coffers for them to spend on COVID-related and economic reform-related issues. It's not specified. We'll learn more next week. Apparently, there'll be more detail released next week. But the real issue facing South Africa is threefold. We have a fiscal crisis, and we have to cut back, but not so much that it affects growth. That's a difficult tightrope to walk, and that's what the Minister of Finance was trying to do in his supplementary budget. We have to get economic reform happening, and we were told it's nearly a year since the Minister of Finance's economic reform document was released. It'll be a year in August, and very, very little has happened. The third thing is we have many people who are desperate at this time of the economic lockdown, and I think the way in which it has not been well handled by government. So there are a lot of demands on the country and on the fiscus. I think the most important thing is to get trust and confidence back into South Africa. And that means the president has to act. Everybody's tired of words, plans, documents, laundry lists of things to do. What we've got to do is actually get moving. Why is it taking so long to make progress on energy? And if the minister isn't doing what the president wants, the minister should be fired. So we need to actually get progress and have accountability. And so I am in favor of moving forward on a few serious, fundamental things that show everybody South Africa has turned a corner. We're going to act differently. Government is going to behave differently. And I think it's absolutely vital that we move much faster in putting corrupt people on trial and then in jail. We need senior people at the national level and a few in the local authorities to be put in jail to put the fear of retribution into across the country so that we start turning the corner on how we spend our money. South African citizens want value for money, and too much of our money is wasted or it is stolen.
So let's look at specific programs. I mean, we know we have a massive job problem, especially for youth who are unemployed. Is that something that you think we should target with the IMF money, somehow creating jobs, helping to build those infrastructure projects, getting them up and running so that there's more jobs being created? Is that the sort of spending priority that you would suggest for government?
You don't create jobs. You don't spend money and get jobs. You have to get growth, and then you can get jobs through new firms that want to hire people. That's what South Africa needs. And I think, infrastructure is now the new job summit. We're all going to talk about it a great deal, and we're going to agree all sorts of things. We'll have a long list of agreements, but actually nothing will happen. So unless there is a significant change in terms of how the government and the private sector interact, I don't see how we're going to get infrastructure projects that help provide confidence and help move the country forward on growth. So we've got to stop thinking of jobs for young people in a separate compartment from the growth rate of the economy. So there are millions of young people who need jobs. The president has talked of we need short-term courses and we need to help skill young people. Of course we do. But that means you have to fix the TVETs, the CETAs, and basic education. So we've got to, as a country, say we are going to do these 5 things. We'll start here, and they're going to be done in a significantly different way so that it restores confidence and we don't pretend we have a state that has the capacity to do things when we all know it's really weak. It's been shown up to be weak and corrupt even more during COVID. So we have to deal with that. We can't pretend we have an effective state.
Yeah, we have to face it. I think one of the other concerns about this IMF loan, and we know that the COVID loans from the IMF have, I think, a lot less harsh restrictions and conditions on them. But there is concern that this is just the beginning of a slippery slope and that we're going to have to go back to the IMF for more and more loans, which may have more and more onerous conditions. Concern those will be anti-poor, basically putting us into austerity territory. How real is that risk in your view?
Look, it is a risk, but we're not there yet. The Minister of Finance and the DG are in court as we speak, trying to get out of the second or third year of the wage agreement so they can cut back on civil servant wages. That's important. We shouldn't ignore that. So there is that commitment. I hope the president backs that commitment, and we'll see what happens in court. So government, we have to stop the slide. I agree it's possible, but South Africa can get out of this, but we need to get a real sense of urgency and a seriousness about doing things differently from how we've been doing them pre-COVID, because it's clearly not working. So how we get action and the reforms that we need from what seems to be either an incompetent or recalcitrant cabinet is something that the president has to deal with.
Absolutely.
And we can't keep waiting on this.
Indeed, and thank you very much for your time this evening, Ann Bernstein from the Centre for Development Enterprise.